The National Desk, America's News, now.
New details out of Georgia into the man believed to be behind the death of a nursing student, how it ties into planned trips to the border by both Donald Trump and Joe Biden.
We have been engaged with them on the need to reform and revitalize the government, and we have seen them start to take steps in that direction, and we welcome them.
A major shakeup with the Palestinian Authority's government could be the biggest indicator of a peace to come. Is a Mideast truce on the horizon? The FTC is blocking a major grocery chain merger years in the making. How inflation plays into the plans to keep the buyout from happening. This is the National Desk, America's News Now. I'm Amira David. Both Donald Trump and President Joe Biden have announced they are headed to the southern border this week. Their visits come as the issue of border security climbed to the top of mind for many voters in this election season, amid record-breaking numbers of migrants heading to the United States to ask for asylum. Putting the topic further into focus, the top suspect in the horrific murder of a Georgia nursing student last week, now confirmed to be an illegal immigrant. Here's national correspondent Christine Frizzell with the latest.
Friday's arrest of Jose Antonio Ibarra was not his first time in police custody in this country. Detained first in September 2022 after entering the country illegally, then paroled and released. A year later, the Venezuelan national was arrested again, charged with child endangerment, plus a motor vehicle license violation in New York City. ICE has confirmed Ibarra was released before a detainer could be issued.
This goes back to why do local and county and state authorities need to be able to communicate with ICE? This is exactly why.
Students and members of the Athens community gathered to remember 22-year-old Laken Riley, a nursing student who an autopsy revealed died as a result of blunt force trauma to the head. Police asserting they have ample evidence to support their claim Ibarra was the perpetrator.
He did not know her at all. I think this was a crime of opportunity.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp blaming failed policies by the White House that have led to millions of migrants coming to the United States and then being allowed to stay, even in the instances when they commit crimes.
We just have a nightmare in this country with mass migration, and then have people that are here illegally breaking our laws, and they're not telling anybody and reporting this to us.
Now questions are mounting about whether cities and states with sanctuary laws, which prevent local authorities from being able to communicate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement about undocumented immigrants in custody, are a threat to society.
We have got to start mixing compassion with people for other countries to compassion and concern for our own people.
President Biden has continued to press Congress to take action on securing the border, but has hinted he may make changes on his own using executive action. I'm Christine Frizzell for the National Desk.
Okay, Christine, thank you. And tonight, negotiations for the release of hostages in Gaza inching closer to a deal. Right now, an Israeli delegation in Qatar to work out the terms of a temporary truce, the framework of which was reportedly ironed out over the weekend during talks in Paris. The State Department signaling it's Hamas that must now agree.
We continue to believe that a deal is possible, and we're going to continue to pursue it. When it comes to Hamas's incentives, far be it from me to offer assessments about what incentivizes them and what doesn't. But I would think if they truly cared about the Palestinian people, they should agree to the deal that is on the table, because it will greatly alleviate the suffering of those Palestinian people.
The potential deal as a shakeup in Palestinian government that could lead to significant reforms. The prime minister in the West Bank, Mohammed Shataya, has resigned, potentially paving the way for a revitalized Palestinian Authority, which has long been sought by the United States, who sees the PA having a leadership role in post-war Gaza. As Israel gears up to intensify its war campaign in Rafah tonight, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has submitted an evacuation plan for civilians to the war cabinet. A big point of contention, Rafah has become home to the majority of displaced Palestinians, more than 1 million Gazans seeking refuge there right now. Many global leaders have voiced concern that any military effort would create mass casualties. The U.S. has warned it will not support a campaign on the city without a credible plan to evacuate civilians. The active duty airman who set himself on fire outside the Israeli embassy in Washington, D.C. is dead. He passed away this morning and was identified as 25-year-old Aaron Bushnell of San Antonio, Texas. Just prior to the extreme act, Bushnell said in a video he didn't want to be complicit in genocide as he screamed, "Free Palestine." Israel has denied claims of genocide, yet with thousands of women and children among the dead in Gaza, the country continues to face criticism. A killer is on the loose in Louisiana. Leon Ruffin, who was serving a life sentence for second-degree murder, escaped custody yesterday after spraying a deputy with pepper spray. The deputy was taking Ruffin to the hospital to treat an apparent seizure. It is not known where Ruffin got the spray, as the deputy had their pepper spray and firearm on them after the attack. The Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office considers Ruffin to be armed and dangerous. Katrina Bauer and Jessie Vang, the mother and caretaker of missing 3-year-old Elijah View, were both charged with criminal child neglect and obstruction today. Elijah has been missing since last Tuesday when he was in the care of Jessie Vang. The criminal complaint also details the disciplinary abuse Elijah was under in Vang's care. Vang told officers the boy was in timeout for the majority of the time he was being watched, and this care was intended as a form of boot camp. Vang could not identify any behavior that elicited the treatment. The Supreme Court hearing oral arguments in a pair of cases that will determine how social media platforms are allowed to operate. Republican leaders in Texas and Florida defending new state laws that set limits on content moderation, which social media companies say violates their free speech. National correspondent Atrel Nashar shows us how this played out with each of the 9 justices.
The nation's highest court contemplating what free speech means in the digital age. In 2020 and 2021, when misinformation about vaccines and election integrity were a national focus, many Republicans accused platforms of censoring conservative views. Republican leaders in Texas and Florida passed laws to limit how social media companies control content.
Freedom of speech is under attack in Texas.
The laws have been on hold pending litigation brought by trade groups representing tech companies.
Our 2 associations brought these lawsuits to protect the First Amendment rights of websites when they're making editorial choices about what kind of content is appropriate for their communities.
Justices hearing arguments about how the laws would actually play out.
The consistency provision, which is really the heart of our law, just says to the platforms, apply your content moderation policies consistently.
Well, that's effectively saying Nazi propaganda and ISIS extremism, rantings online, to say nothing of predators and fraud. All of that has to be put on equal footing with decent American internet users.
Justices Sotomayor and Barrett raising potential unintended consequences of the laws. For example, Etsy requires sellers limit products to handmade goods, vintage, and craft supplies. Would these laws prevent Etsy from this practice upon which its brand is built? Even Florida says there's not a clear sense of which platforms would and would not be impacted.
That's part of the problem in this case, is that we don't have a sense of, the record has not been fully developed to answer that question, so we're kind of litigating in the dark here.
At the end of arguments, the justices appeared torn. They're also considering whether social media sites are common carriers that just transmit user content, or if they moderate that content, are they more like editors? The court is expected to decide the fate of these state laws by June. In Washington, I'm Atrel Nashar for the National Desk, America's News Now.
Acher, thank you. President Biden will host congressional leaders tomorrow at the White House as a partial government shutdown could happen on Friday. The White House says leaders will prioritize the urgency of passing an emergency aid package for Ukraine and Israel, as well as averting a looming government shutdown in March. The House is under pressure right now to pass the $95 billion national security package, which has bipartisan support in the Senate. Not clear where it stands in the House. Some House Republicans want both money and security guarantees for the southern border before they will agree to other spending obligations. After Friday, if nothing gets accomplished, then the Departments of Energy, Veterans Affairs, Transportation, and the Food and Drug Administration will be impacted. There's another deadline on March 8th that would impact additional departments, including the Department of Defense and of Homeland Security. An Illinois judge who reversed a man's rape conviction is no longer on the bench after a state commission found he circumvented the law. Judge Robert Adrian found Drew Clinton guilty of assaulting a 16-year-old back in 2021, then threw out the conviction in 2022, sparking outrage. The Illinois Courts Commission removed Adrian from the bench on Friday after a 3-day hearing. Donald Trump may be facing another gag order, this time in the criminal hush money case. Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg is requesting the order, saying the former president's comments about potential witnesses and others involved have resulted in hundreds of threats to his office. And Trump is appealing the massive judgment against his businesses in New York. His lawyers are asking the mid-level appeals court to overturn Judge Engoron's $454 million judgment against Trump for fraud. Trump's team hopes to find out if Engoron committed any errors. The judge found Trump lied about his wealth for a more favorable bottom line. The FBI informant accused of lying about President Biden will remain jailed. A judge has ordered Alexander Smirnov to remain in custody as he awaits trial. Prosecutors say Smirnov lied about the president and his son Hunter, implicating them in a multi-million-dollar bribery scheme involving a Ukrainian energy company. Smirnov reportedly told investigators Russian intelligence officials were involved in passing the story. And coming up, as some parts of the country drop below freezing, others are getting unusually warm temperatures. The temperature records expected to be broken this week. Then what authorities believe happened to a Virginia couple who disappeared in the Caribbean last week as the search intensifies. And what's being done at the federal level to address concerns about high rates of cancer among firefighters? We're back in 90 seconds. A major winter storm impacting much of the western U.S., bringing up to 4 feet of snow to some areas by tomorrow. Heavy mountain snow, strong winds, dangerous travel forecast from northwest all the way to Minnesota. Severe thunderstorms affecting more than 44 million people tomorrow in the Midwest and the Great Lakes, with large hail and tornadoes possible. And above average temperatures forecast for more than 250 million Americans today. And here are just a few of the records that were already broken in Dallas, Chicago, and Indianapolis. More than 300 records could be broken through the middle of the week. RNC Chair Ronna McDaniel says she will resign from her position on March 8th, a few days after the Super Tuesday primary elections. This will allow former president and presumptive nominee Donald Trump to pick a new chair. McDaniel became the RNC chair back in 2017 when then President Trump selected her to take over for Reince Priebus. She had been the chairwoman of the Republican Party in Michigan before that. So who is going to be the party's new leader? Former President Trump has loyalists he'd like to see in that spot, including Michael Whatley, chair of the North Carolina GOP, and Trump campaign advisor Chris Lissavita. Another is his daughter-in-law, Lara Trump, who'd serve as co-chair if it were up to the former president.
There is no script to go off of for situations like this.
The sons of a Virginia couple who disappeared in the Caribbean last week are holding out hope that their parents are still alive. Kathleen Brendel and Ralph Hendry were reported missing from their yacht, which was docked in Grenada. Authorities believe it was taken by 3 escaped prisoners accused of hijacking the yacht. The Coast Guard and local police continue their search while the suspects are back in custody. Dozens of Outback steakhouses, Bonefish Grills, Carrabba Italian Grills, and Fleming's restaurants are slated to close. The parent company suddenly shutting down 41 underperforming locations across its brands, attributing the move to poor sales and high costs. But Outback does plan to open up 18 new U.S. restaurants this year, with a new layout that it revealed back in 2022. The Federal Trade Commission joined 8 states and the District of Columbia in suing to block Kroger's proposed nearly $25 billion acquisition of Albertsons. The 2 grocers agreed to merge in October of 2022, saying it would help them better compete with other big rivals like Walmart, Amazon, and Costco. The FTC argues the merger would drive up prices by eliminating competition in the grocery industry and make it a lot harder for unionized workers to negotiate higher wages. And AT&T customers, the ones that were affected by last week's outage, they are getting a $5 Make It Right credit, which the company says is the average cost of a day's service. Thousands couldn't call, text, or use the internet on their phones for hours. It also impacted FirstNet, the dedicated first responder communications network. The company says a network misconfiguration likely caused the outage. Alec Baldwin has his new day in court. The involuntary manslaughter trial stemming from the fatal shooting of Rust cinematographer Helena Hutchins will begin on July 9th. With jury selection, opening statements will then take place on July 10th. Attorneys for each side expect the trial to run about 10 days. Hannah Gutierrez Reed, the armorer on the Rust set, is in the middle of her involuntary manslaughter trial right now. We have reporters all across the country in your neighborhoods covering the issues that matter most to you. We're taking the pulse of America.
Families enjoying their night before this monster truck reversed, running over the crew member.
It turned from hearing monster trucks to hearing screaming and crying and everybody in awe.
The man who shared these clips with us says he and the rest of the crowd was in complete shock. Marion County Sheriff Matt Bales says medics responded to the scene and the arena was evacuated. Those inside told us it was chaotic. Heminger tells us she believes this crash may have not happened if the show was in a larger venue.
It's way too small. They used to do arena football there too. It was barely big enough for that. So I don't think they should have monster trucks inside that anymore.
This is called the Healing Outlet. It's made by DC residents for DC residents, and it connects them with a number of resources. You can see it's a place to connect those impacted by gun violence in DC with resources and a supportive community. Take a listen to what one of the founders has to say about it.
When you give a person resources and you give a person everything they need to thrive, then that's what they'll do. They'll thrive. But when you under-resource a community and you don't give a community what they need in order to be sustainable, then they won't be sustainable and crime will be high. We'll have high crime rates.
Here's how the app plays a role in helping with reducing those crime rates. There's videos talking about topics like domestic violence, suicide, how to deal with bullying. You can even access hotlines quickly and get help. There's also a look at food, housing, events in the community.
And Pennsylvania State Police are investigating after a police cruiser crashed right into a residence at the Catalina Apartments in Harrisburg last night. Fire officials say those inside the apartment were evacuated. Today, police said the officer experienced a significant medical emergency before the crash. The officer was taken to a hospital to be evaluated, and no other injuries were reported. Coming up, what happened when our team asked the CDC how much money is going towards researching PFAS chemicals and cancer in firefighters? We'll be right back. Firefighters are dying of cancer at young ages, and new questions are being raised about what is being done to protect the heroes who protect us. Spotlight on America first reported about the heightened risk of cancer among firefighters last month. Now, national investigative correspondent Lisa Fletcher is pressing for answers in Congress.
When terrorists hit the Pentagon with a passenger jet on September 11th, 2001, firefighter Brian Harisic had a week-old baby.
Brian looked at me and said, "Hey, I have to go to work."
Harisic was dedicated to his career, serving as a medic and firefighter. That baby, his daughter Madison, now 22, is navigating life without her dad.
My dad was my best friend on the planet.
Last year, at age 51, he died of pancreatic cancer, leaving his family wondering if the profession he loved may have caused the disease that took his life. In 2023, 72% of line-of-duty deaths for firefighters were from cancer. Among the unique risks, toxic PFAS chemicals, known carcinogens, coating their turnout gear.
I am concerned at the slow pace that we are moving to address this real problem.
Massachusetts Congressman Jim McGovern has been among the loudest voices on this issue for more than 6 years and is a co-sponsor of a new bill to get the PFAS out of firefighter gear. But this isn't a first attempt. Despite multiple bills addressing this, nothing has passed at the federal level to ban the chemicals or force insurance companies to cover early cancer screening for firefighters. Seems like it takes a long time for the urgency of something to reach the levels at which change happens.
It is frustrating and it is maddening that we are moving at such a slow pace. I mean, there are chemical companies and there are corporate interests and there's lots of money that is involved, and as a result, there's always an excuse not to move forward.
6 years ago, Congress created the Firefighter Cancer Registry to gather information for prevention and diagnosis, but its creation was met with little urgency. Congress passed the Firefighter Cancer Registry in 2018. It's now 2024. There's still no usable data.
There's no excuse for that. There's no excuse at all. And there's no excuse, again, for Congress not acting more deliberately. The lack of action on PFAS, the runaround on screening for cancer for firefighters, all that, is something that we should be ashamed about. Our firefighters deserve a hell of a lot better.
And for the Horisic family, that starts with cancer testing for firefighters early and often.
Had they caught it a month earlier, 2 months earlier, would we have been able to change the ending? These people go in and they risk their lives every day to be the light in someone's storm. We need to do the same for them.
Congressman McGovern is fighting to do just that and losing patience for the inaction in Washington.
Well, how the hell were we so complacent for all these years? I mean, what the hell are we waiting for?
For Spotlight on America, I'm Lisa Fletcher.
And by the way, we asked the CDC, given the known risk of cancer among firefighters, how much funding is going into researching PFAS, specifically related to firefighter cancer. The agency did not answer our question. We'll be right back. Communication with the lunar lander that's been on the moon since Thursday is expected to die tomorrow morning, about 4 days earlier than hoped. That's because it tipped over after landing and is not getting enough sunlight on solar panels to keep communicating, according to its maker. However, the company says it did collect information about safe landing sites that could be very valuable for the future, especially for the first planned human moon landing in decades, expected in 2026. That does it for the National Desk. Thank you so much for watching.